Ghana's housing challenges are enormous. The situation keeps getting worse as no concrete measures have been put in place to comprehensively address it. For researchers in the area of settlement studies, policymakers will have to come up with plans on properly tackling the housing deficit in the country. Citing researches being done at his inaugural professorial lecture at KNUST, the head of the Center for Settlement Studies at the university, Professor Divine Ahaji, who described Ghana as a failed state in terms of housing, challenged politicians to design strategies to address the issue.
It's high time Ghana admits that based on the situation, we are a failed society through housing. From the year 2010, a country like South Africa, in 2015 to 2018, 3 years, built 580,000 houses. Angola made an effort, 2011 to 2016, to build 70,000 houses. Malaysia, whom we have many similarities with, and the same population, in their Vision 2020, had a program with the private sector, and their position was to build about 800,000 houses. They actually exceeded by building 859,480. I don't know whether you have ever heard in this country whether Ghana government or the state has had any concrete program with, let's say, Ghana Real Estate Development Association, that they should give us 500,000 houses. These are our competitors, and this is the level that they are operating at. And look at Ghana. From the year 2010 to 2020, if I am to ask you, the housing government has supplied, maybe you have your own data, but we all know that the affordable housing started in 2004, and it took 20 years, and that was only 5,000. Now we also have Saglemi, also going through states. And I think in the run-up to the 2024 elections, we need to ask the politicians to tell us what is the philosophy of housing in Ghana and what is the welfare position of Ghana. And then the right to housing must be considered for inclusion into the constitution.
He says studies conducted in many communities in Ghana show that a major housing challenge people are facing is access to funds to get decent spaces. He's thus advocating for policymakers to design affordable housing schemes that purposefully target the vulnerable who in actual sense cannot afford decent houses.
Our affordability issues must be redefined and looked at again. And I think this is something that we call for serious public discourse. Recently, we did a study in Kumasi, Asawasi, Atonsu, and Ayija, and it shows that based on their current income, their rent-to-income ratio was around 10%. So many of the people who, sorry to say, live in the areas that we declare substandard pay about 10% of their income on housing because that is based on their income. That is why they choose to live in such situations. We try to compare that by moving them to a standard house based on the income and realize that if we are to use the rent to income, it will go past 50%. And based on our benchmark, the benchmark says that your rent to income should not exceed 30%. So what it means is that many of all those people actually cannot fend for themselves when it comes to housing and will need some form of support. And that is why we have to properly define the issue of affordability so that it targets those who really need it.
According to Professor Divine Ahaji, stakeholders' inability to properly tackle housing needs of Ghanaians has led to the worsening flooding situation in the country. In recent times, lives are lost each year as properties are destroyed due to floods. Professor Divine Ahaji says available data shows that the country's flood preparedness is not getting any better. He's thus calling on government to put measures in place in order to prevent flooding incidents that could potentially lead to the loss of many lives that can be likened to the June 3, 2015 disaster.
Regions that experienced floods in the year 2021. 13 regions across the 16 experienced flood in this country in 2021, and that should be worrying for us. What is also worrying is that if you look at the bimodal curve on the right, typically the peak of the rainy season is from April to July. But what we experienced in 2021 actually happened in November, including the tidal wave that happened at Keta and Ketu South in November 2021. And if many of you recall, In 2022, we had a similar trend, although it was not such a degree. So what is the picture is painting is that through our inefficiencies in housing, flooding is now becoming a national problem for all of us. Currently, Ghana experiences major floods every 2 years for the last 20 years. And if you recall, just a week or 2 weeks ago, we had some flooding at Araga Junction in Kumasi. Last year was a bit silent, and that's the scenario that it is painting. What is clear is that our preparedness is not getting any better. And now, Madam Chair, the June 3rd, 2015 incident is equivalent to what we call the 10-year return period storm. The question we need to ask as we sit here today, because the 10 years is approaching, what it means is that the incident can happen anytime. It could be this year, it could be next year, it could be the following year. And that's the question. Have we done enough as a nation to help mitigate the worst of the worst if the 3rd June incident should happen again?
Despite the numerous challenges that the country faces when it comes to the housing sector, it appears stakeholders have not given it the needed attention. And as such, they have been urged to find ways of addressing it comprehensively. For Citi News, I'm Edward Oponmafo, Kumasi.